The afternoon sun filtered through the tall oak trees on Maple Street, casting gentle shadows across Sarah's front porch. She had just returned from her business trip to Portland, her small rolling suitcase clicking rhythmically behind her on the brick walkway. The familiar sight of her Victorian home brought a sense of peace after 2 weeks away. The blue shutters looked freshly painted, and her mother's rose garden was blooming beautifully in the late spring warmth. Sarah fumbled for her keys, breathing in the sweet scent of jasmine that climbed the white trellis beside her front door. The neighborhood was quiet, as it always was on weekday afternoons. Children were still in school, and most of the adults were at work. She loved this peaceful time of day. As she turned the key in the lock, she heard footsteps approaching from next door. Mrs. Chun, her elderly neighbor, was walking toward her with an expression of concern etched across her weathered face. Sarah had always appreciated Mrs. Chun's watchful eye over the neighborhood. She was the kind of neighbor who noticed when mail piled up or when someone's garden needed watering. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Chun called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency. "I'm so glad you're back. I need to speak with you about something important." Sarah paused, her hand still on the doorknob. Mrs. Chun's tone was more serious than usual. The older woman approached slowly, her cane tapping gently on the sidewalk. "What is it, Mrs. Chun? Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, genuine concern in her voice. Mrs. Chun glanced around nervously before speaking. "There was screaming coming from your house," she said, her words measured and careful. "It happened 3 times while you were away. I was so worried. I almost called the police." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm afternoon. "Screaming? Are you sure it was coming from my house?" "Oh yes, dear. I know every sound in this neighborhood. It was definitely coming from inside your home. The first time was about a week ago, late at night. Then again 3 days ago during the afternoon, and once more just yesterday evening." Sarah's mind raced. She had been in Portland for 2 weeks. For a work conference, the house had been empty. Only her parents had keys for emergencies, but they lived across town and rarely came by unannounced. "Did you see anyone coming or going?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chun shook her head slowly. "That's what worried me most. No cars in your driveway, no lights on that I could see, but the screaming. It was so loud, so desperate, I couldn't ignore it." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she pushed open her front door. The house felt different somehow, though she couldn't put her finger on exactly what had changed. The familiar smell of her vanilla candles lingered in the air, but there was something else too, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. "Would you like me to come in with you?" Mrs. Chun offered kindly. "No, thank you. I should check things out myself first," Sarah replied, though part of her wished she didn't have to enter alone. Mrs. Chun nodded understandingly. "I'll be right next door if you need anything, dear. Don't hesitate to call." Sarah stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The house was exactly as she had left it. Her coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter where she had placed it. Before leaving for the airport, the stack of mail her mother had collected lay neatly on the dining room table. Everything appeared normal. She walked slowly through each room, looking for any sign of disturbance. The living room was untouched. Her bedroom showed no signs of intrusion. Even her jewelry box remained exactly as she had left it. But the feeling persisted that something was not quite right. As she made her way to her home office, she noticed something that made her pause. Her desk chair was turned at a slightly different angle than usual. She always pushed it neatly under the desk when she left the room, but now it was pulled out just a few inches. Sarah sat down in the chair and looked around the room more carefully. Her computer appeared to be off as she had left it. The papers on her desk were still organized. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. on the bookshelf across from her desk. One of her picture frames was facing the wrong direction. She always kept her family photos turned toward the room, but this one was angled toward the wall. As she reached to turn it around, her fingers detected something unusual attached to the back of the frame. A small, black device no bigger than a button was carefully hidden behind the photograph. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a camera. A hidden camera that had been recording everything in her office. Her mind reeled as she processed this discovery. Someone had been in her house. Someone had installed surveillance equipment. But who and why? With shaking hands, she carefully removed the tiny device and examined it more closely. It appeared to be a high-quality wireless camera, the kind that could stream video directly to a remote location. Sarah's thoughts immediately turned to her recent work situation. She had been involved in a complex legal case involving corporate fraud. Several people had access to sensitive information about her investigation. Could someone have been trying to spy on her work? She searched the rest of the house methodically, checking every room for additional cameras. In her bedroom, she found another device hidden inside a decorative vase on her dresser. In the living room, a third camera was concealed behind a picture frame on the manteopiece. The realization hit her like a wave. The screaming Mrs. Chun had heard wasn't coming from inside her house at all. It was coming from the small speakers in these wireless cameras. Someone had been testing them remotely, checking the audio quality and connection strength. Sarah felt violated and frightened, but also strangely relieved. At least now she understood what had happened. The mystery had an explanation, even if it was deeply unsettling. She gathered all 3 cameras and placed them carefully in a plastic bag. This was evidence that needed to be handled properly. Tomorrow, she would contact the police and her attorney. Tonight, she would change all her locks and stay at her parents' house. As the sun began to set, Sarah packed a small overnight bag. The house that had felt like a sanctuary just hours ago now felt foreign and unsafe. She would return, of course, but only after taking every precaution to ensure her security. Before leaving, she walked next door to thank Mrs. Chun, the elderly woman's vigilance had likely prevented something much worse from happening. "I don't know what I would have done without your watchful eye," Sarah said, giving her neighbor a grateful hug. Mrs. Chun patted her shoulder gently. "We look out for each other on this street, dear. That's what neighbors do." As Sarah drove away toward her parents' house, she felt a mixture of emotions: fear, anger, and violation, but also gratitude for having such caring neighbors and relief that the mystery was solved. The screaming had been a warning, in its own strange way. A sign that something was wrong, even when everything appeared normal. On the surface, sometimes the most important truths are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to notice that something isn't quite as it should be.